There is a version of you that nobody around you wants to exist. Not because they wish you harm, not because they are jealous, not because they are bad people, but because the version of you that has money, real money, serious money, the kind of money that produces options and creates distance between you and the systems built to control ordinary people. That version of you becomes something the people around you, the institutions above you, and the systems surrounding you genuinely cannot afford. That version of you is dangerous. Dangerous to the employers who need you compliant. Dangerous to the financial institutions that need you dependent. Dangerous to the social dynamics that need you predictable. Dangerous to the psychological patterns that have kept you manageable your entire life. And the most disturbing part of what I'm going to show you tonight is this. The reason most people never become that dangerous version of themselves has nothing to do with intelligence, nothing to do with opportunity, and nothing to do with luck. It has to do with the fact that the dangerous version of you was dismantled before you were old enough to understand what was being taken. Tonight, we rebuild it. In 2015, researchers at Princeton University published a study examining the relationship between financial security and what they called psychological bandwidth. The study found something that sounds almost too simple to be significant until you follow its implications all the way down. When people experience financial scarcity, not just poverty, but any condition where financial concerns dominate mental attention, their effective cognitive capacity is measurably reduced. Not because they are less intelligent, because the mental resources consumed by financial anxiety leave fewer resources available for everything else. For long-term planning, for creative problem solving, for resisting impulsive decisions, for seeing options that are not immediately obvious. The researchers used a striking analogy. Financial scarcity, they wrote, is like running too many programs on a computer simultaneously. The hardware is the same, the processing power is the same, but with too many programs running, the system slows, performance degrades, and complex tasks become difficult or impossible. Now consider what this means in reverse. When financial scarcity is removed, when the programs consuming bandwidth are closed, cognitive capacity is restored. Long-term thinking becomes available. Pattern recognition sharpens. Options that were previously invisible become visible. And perhaps most significantly, the ability to refuse, to resist, to say no to conditions that don't serve you becomes psychologically accessible in a way it simply was not before. This is what money actually gives you. Not comfort, not security in the conventional sense, not things. It gives you your mind back. And a person with their full mind operating, without the cognitive tax of financial anxiety, without the compliance that scarcity enforces, without the predictability that financial dependence produces, is genuinely dangerous to every system designed to benefit from their limitation. What I'm about to show you are the 7 ways that money makes you dangerous. Not dangerous in a destructive sense. Dangerous in the sense that matters most. Dangerous to the systems, institutions, and dynamics that profit from your current condition. The most fundamental danger that money creates is the simplest. It gives you the ability to say no. This sounds trivial until you examine how much of ordinary life is structured around the impossibility of saying no. You cannot say no to a job that underpays you when you have no financial buffer and rent is due in 10 days. You cannot say no to a client who disrespects you when losing that client means you cannot cover your expenses. You cannot say no to a living situation, a relationship dynamic, a professional arrangement, or a social obligation that diminishes you, when saying no carries a financial cost you cannot absorb. Financial dependence is not just an economic condition. It is a psychological state in which your no has been disabled, in which your boundaries are theoretical because the cost of enforcing them is genuinely catastrophic. The research on this is unambiguous. Studies on negotiation consistently show that the single most powerful predictor of negotiation outcomes is not skill, not information, not experience. It is what researchers call BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Your ability to walk away, your no. The person who can walk away always negotiates better than the person who cannot. Not because they are smarter, because their no is real. Money makes your no real. And a person whose no is real is immediately and profoundly dangerous to every employer who has been underpaying them, every institution that has been undervaluing them, every dynamic that has been exploiting their inability to leave. This is why the system is not neutral about whether you accumulate financial reserves. Employers who pay just enough to keep you unable to leave are not making an accidental error in compensation strategy. They are making a deliberate calculation about the value of your inability to say no. The moment you say no, backed by the financial ability to absorb the consequences, everything changes. Your leverage in every negotiation, your relationship with every institution, your own self-perception as someone whose choices are real rather than theoretical. This is the first danger money creates, and it is the one that every other danger builds on. The second danger is one that the financial system, the employer class, and the social structures around you depend on more than almost anything else: your predictability. Ordinary financial life is extraordinarily predictable. The paycheck arrives on a known date. It covers known expenses with a known margin. The behaviors it produces, the spending patterns, the saving patterns, the borrowing patterns, the compliance patterns, are statistically reliable and commercially exploitable. The entire consumer credit industry is built on the predictability of ordinary financial behavior. The marketing industry is built on the predictability of ordinary financial psychology. The employment market is built on the predictability of ordinary financial desperation. The political fundraising industry is built on the predictability of ordinary financial anxiety, translating into specific political preferences and behaviors. You are valuable to these systems, not as an individual, but as a predictable unit in a predictable mass. Money disrupts this, not dramatically, not all at once, but fundamentally. When you have financial reserves, the paycheck-to-paycheck predictability of your behavior breaks down. When you have options, your consumer behavior becomes less compulsive and more deliberate. When your no becomes real, your employment behavior becomes less compliant and more strategic. When your financial anxiety reduces, your political and social behavior becomes less reactive and more considered. You become harder to model, harder to market to, harder to manage, harder to predict. The hedge fund manager who has studied retail investor psychology for decades profits specifically from the predictability of retail investor panic and overconfidence. The moment a retail investor stops behaving predictably, stops panic selling at the bottom, stops buying in euphoria at the top, the hedge fund's edge against that investor disappears. Your unpredictability is their loss of income. This is why behavioral economists employed by financial institutions spend extraordinary resources studying and mapping the predictable responses of ordinary financial psychology. Not to understand you, to stay ahead of your predictable behaviors and position themselves profitably on the other side of them. Money reduces your predictability, and reduced predictability is a form of genuine danger to every system that profits from knowing what you will do next. The third danger returns to the Princeton bandwidth research and takes it further. When financial scarcity consumes cognitive bandwidth, the first casualty is not intelligence. It is what psychologists call executive function. The higher-order cognitive processes responsible for long-term planning, pattern recognition across time, evaluation of complex options, and the ability to resist immediate pressures in favor of better long-term outcomes. The person in financial scarcity is not less intelligent than their financially secure counterpart. They are cognitively occupied. The bandwidth available for executive function has been partially redirected toward the constant monitoring, calculation, and anxiety of financial precarity. And here is the consequence that most people never consider. A significant portion of what looks like poor financial decision-making in ordinary people is not poor decision-making at all. It is rational decision-making under cognitive constraints that the wealthy do not experience. The person who takes a payday loan at 400% annual interest is not irrational. They are solving an immediate problem with the cognitive resources available to them in that moment. The option that looks obviously superior to someone with full cognitive bandwidth, wait, save, find a better solution, is not psychologically accessible to someone whose bandwidth is consumed by the immediate pressure. When money removes financial anxiety, executive function is restored. And with restored executive function, a person begins to see things they literally could not see before. They see the long game. They see the patterns that were obscured by immediate pressure. They see the structural dynamics of the systems around them, the way the employer extracts value, the way the financial product is designed against their interest, the way the social arrangement that felt natural was actually conditional on their inability to leave. They see the trap from the inside. And a person who can see the trap from the inside and has the financial capacity to exit it is dangerous in a way that a person inside the trap who cannot see it simply cannot be. The fourth danger is perhaps the most personally transformative. Under financial scarcity, time is not yours. It is sold, hourly or in salary blocks, or in the ambient availability that employment requires, in exchange for the security it provides. The psychological experience of time in ordinary employed financial life is the experience of a resource that belongs to someone else and is occasionally loaned back to you in the form of evenings, weekends, and vacation days. This is not a dramatic statement. It is the mechanical reality of trading time for income. Money changes this relationship, not instantaneously, not completely, but directionally and irreversibly once it begins. When you have financial reserves, your time horizon for decisions about your time extends. You do not need to sell this hour because you are covered for this month. You can decline the work that diminishes you without the immediate consequence of financial crisis. And more profoundly, the mental space that financial security creates allows you to begin treating your time as a resource to be invested rather than a commodity to be sold. The billionaire who thinks about other people's time, whose structures deploy collective time in ways that generate returns for the owner, can only think this way because their own time is no longer consumed by the immediate necessity of selling it. You cannot think architecturally about time when you are in survival mode with your own hours. Money returns your time to you. And a person whose time is their own, who chooses how it is spent rather than selling it to whoever will pay the most for it, is dangerous to every employer who has built their business model around the reliable availability of people who have no choice but to sell. The fifth danger is one that most people have never explicitly articulated, but will recognize immediately when they hear it. Financial dependence is a permission structure. Every significant life decision made under financial dependence requires implicit or explicit permission from whoever controls the financial access. The career change requires permission from the employer who will fund it or the institution that will lend for it. The geographic move requires permission from the financial circumstances that make it feasible. The relationship exit requires permission from the financial reality of single-income life. The business idea requires permission from the lender, the investor, the employer who might be left. You do not experience these as permissions because they are not presented as permissions. They are presented as circumstances, as practical realities, as the way things work. But they function as permissions, and they are granted or withheld by whoever controls the financial circumstances that make your choices feasible. Money removes this permission structure. Not all of it at once, not permanently and completely, but progressively and meaningfully. Each layer of financial security removed is a permission that no longer needs to be sought. Each financial buffer built is a decision that can now be made without reference to whoever previously held the power to grant or withhold that permission. The career change that required the employer's blessing becomes an independent decision. The geographic move that required the lender's approval becomes a personal choice. The business that required an investor's permission becomes a self-funded reality. A person who stops needing permission, whose life decisions are genuinely their own, rather than granted by the financial controllers around them, is dangerous to every institution that benefits from being the grantor of permission in their life. This is not abstract. It is the specific danger that makes financial independence genuinely threatening to specific institutions with specific financial interests in your continued dependence. The sixth danger is the one that is most rarely discussed, because acknowledging it requires acknowledging something deeply uncomfortable about how ordinary social and institutional life actually operates. The most powerful control mechanism in modern society is not force. It is not law. It is not even explicit threat. It is financial consequence. The implied or explicit threat of financial harm, job loss, credit damage, contract termination, social exclusion with financial implications, is the primary mechanism by which compliance is extracted from ordinary people in ordinary life. You do not need to explicitly threaten someone with starvation to control their behavior. You only need to maintain a system in which their financial security is contingent on their compliance, and then signal, explicitly or implicitly, that non-compliance carries financial consequences. The employee who witnesses wrongdoing and says nothing is not a coward. They are a person for whom the financial consequence of speaking is genuinely catastrophic. The contractor who accepts terms they know are exploitative is not weak. They are a person whose financial reality makes refusal impossible. The voter who votes against their own clear interest is often a person whose financial anxiety has been deliberately inflamed to produce a specific, predictable response. Financial dependence is the mechanism, financial consequence is the threat, and compliance is the output. Money makes you progressively immune to this mechanism, not completely, not immediately, but meaningfully. Each layer of financial security built is a layer of immunity from the threat of financial consequence. Each buffer established is a reduction in the power of the threat. Each option created is a reduction in the leverage held by whoever currently controls your financial access. A person who cannot be controlled by financial threat is genuinely, profoundly dangerous to every institution and individual whose power over them depends on that threat remaining credible. The seventh danger synthesizes everything that came before it. Consider what has been described in the previous 6 points. The ability to say no, the unpredictability that breaks every system designed to exploit your behavior, the cognitive bandwidth that allows you to see the trap you are in, the time that is yours again, the absence of permission structures, the immunity from financial threat. Put all of these together, and what you have is not just a financially secure person. You have a person who has been fundamentally restructured at the psychological level, who relates to institutions, employers, social systems, and power structures in a completely different way than the person they were before, who has recovered a level of autonomy that most ordinary people never experience, who has become genuinely difficult to manage, exploit, manipulate, or control. You have become the person that the entire architecture of ordinary financial life was designed to prevent. This is not paranoia. This is incentive analysis. The institutions that profit from your financial dependence have a direct financial interest in ensuring you never accumulate enough to become the dangerous version of yourself. The employer who benefits from your inability to leave has an interest in your continued inability to leave. The lender who profits from your financial anxiety has an interest in the continuation of that anxiety. The advertiser who profits from your consumption compulsiveness has an interest in the perpetuation of that compulsiveness. None of them conspire against you in a coordinated, deliberate way. They simply follow their financial interests. And their financial interests align, without conspiracy, without coordination, without explicit design, into a system that rewards your dependence and penalizes your accumulation. The system does not hate you. It simply profits from you exactly as you are. And the most dangerous thing you can do to every institution, every employer, every lender, every system that has built its model around the reliable exploitation of your current condition is to become something different. Here is what I want you to take from this video. The framing of wealth as comfort, as security, as the acquisition of things, is a framing that serves the people who benefit from you not having it. When you think about money as something that buys comfort and things, you remain a consumer. You remain predictable. You remain inside the system looking for the better version of your current life, rather than outside the system looking at it. When you think about money as something that makes you dangerous, to employers who need you compliant, to institutions who need you dependent, to systems who need you predictable, to dynamics who need you manageable, you understand what it actually is. It is not comfort, it is power. Not the power of domination, the power of genuine autonomy, the power of a no that is real, the power of time that is yours, the power of options that are actual, the power of decisions that require no one's permission. This is what the dangerous version of yourself looks like. And the dangerous version of yourself is the version that every system you currently live inside has a financial interest in preventing, which means becoming it is not just a personal goal. It is an act of resistance. There is a version of you that nobody around you wants to exist. We started there. The employer who needs you to show up because you have no choice. The lender who needs you anxious because anxiety keeps you borrowing. The system that needs you predictable because predictability keeps you exploitable. None of them are your enemy, but none of them are working toward the version of you that can say no, that cannot be threatened, that does not need permission, that sees the trap, that has their time back, that is genuinely free to choose. That version is built one financial decision at a time, one layer of buffer at a time, one reduced dependence at a time. It is built slowly, it is built quietly. It is built in the gap between what the system needs you to do and what you actually choose to do. Build it. Subscribe, because every video on this channel is a blueprint for the dangerous version of yourself. And leave a comment. Which of the 7 dangers most changed how you see your own financial situation? Because one of them described exactly where you are right now.